In the early 1980s, a loud, raw form of music arrived in Minnesota.
It was fast, loud, obnoxious, beautiful.
I like music where someone's going to take the folding chair and smash it on my head.
Not everyone likes hardcore, and they don't like that fast, loud music. I love it because I am loud and I'm fast.
The kids that were my age, into it in the Twin Cities, you're talking 40, 50 people in a city of, 2 million.
And if you weren't hardcore, you are a poser, right? Fucking posers.
We're hardcore, and we would have these little kid pits, we're dancing, it was just at the time, it was the most exciting thing on two wheels.
This is the story of Minnesota hardcore. Minnesota in the late 1960s. An explosion of teenagers forming bands. Garage rock, folk rock, psychedelic rock, nightclubs, dances, love-ins. It was a social scene. The Hullabaloo, the New City Opera House, the prison. If you were young and into loud rock, there was a scene for you. This was all disappearing by the early 1970s.
James Taylor on KQ92, 92 FM and 1440 AM.
God, I sure am glad that I found him.
Keeping things warm on KS95 FM with a hot new sound from the Little River Band. Take it easy.
I turned my radio off probably in 1970 when there was just a lot of junk on radio, especially in the Midwest.
It was, Ted Nugent, and it was Fleetwood Mac, and it was the Eagles and all that stuff. It was, KQRS playing the same thing that everybody else, and after a while you just say enough is enough.
And I'm in this halfway house, I'm listening to Steve Miller, the Eagles, Pablo Cruz, all that kind of stuff. And then in this halfway house, I meet these guys, and all of a sudden it's like all about punk rock. I had no idea what punk rock was at the time. I was always running from the cops.
This is punk rock, and its purpose, one observer says, is to promote violence, sex, and destruction in that order.
By the time I got into junior high school, it was like, started hearing about punk rock, but it was always somewhere else. It was like New York, it was London, and I try to remember what the first time I understood there was like punk here in town.
Introducing the Suicide Commandos playing Burn It Down.
The Commandos formed because we hated everything on the radio and we wanted to make rock and roll that we laughingly said was stripped down and shoved into high gear.
You're gonna die because you are so dumb. You don't like it.
They were a three-piece band that just was so fast and furious and so great and had so much energy.
They were the catalyst that started the first wave that started the second wave after that, so we really didn't have anything to compare it with at that point.
There was an explosion of bands. It went from maybe a half a dozen to a dozen. Pretty soon there's 50, 100 bands that want to play. I'm not necessarily a giant punk rock fan. I got stuck in with all that, but that's fine because what I do is a little extreme.
I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it. I just want to talk.
there was a meeting. It was Curtis A. and Suicide Commandos and a couple others, and they literally got together to say, look, where can we go to play original music? And they lucked into Jay's Longhorn, and that really is the birth of punk rock in Minneapolis.
When I was 17, we started hanging out at the Longhorn. And it was like, well, this is for me. Sign me up. I didn't think before that I had the musical chops or the ability to be in a band. And then I did.
I think it was 79 when I was in college in Eau Claire. Like, we drive to the Longhorn from Eau Claire because it's not far. And we were all like, man, punk rock's super cool. We want to be into punk rock. And we're like, we're going to move to Minneapolis because, like, that's a scene there. There's something really cool happening in Minneapolis.
The whole thing about playing punk rock in 1979 and going to the Longhorn and seeing the bands that were there. There were a lot of really good bands, and then there were a lot of us other bands that were just trying to figure it out and having fun.
Younger kids coming to the Longhorn were looking for something new, something raw.
The Suburbs were my favorite of all of them. That was what made me like punk rock. And then they kind of went into dance. They went dance.
I think I saw the last punk show that the Suburbs probably ever did. And then for like a week later, they had like bow ties on and like wanted to be from New York or something like that.
I see in color.
In the very early days in the Longhorn and the Suburbs and then sort of new wave and punk rock, the influence was coming from New York. And it was pretty obvious. I mean, that's where everything came from. And I loved that. That was awesome. But at the same time, there was this noise coming from the West Coast. And it didn't seem like very many people were into it or really giving it much credit.
The way I've heard it is hardcore pretty much started in Orange County in California with bands like The Middle Class, and Black Flag is probably the best known one.
That was like the new thing that was happening. Like, you know, there was punk rock, but then there's like, oh, now we have hardcore. We're distilling punk rock down into the barest, most minimal elements and speed it up at the same time.
And like literally it was a moment in time that parted paths with some of my best friends because they were just like, that's just retread bullshit. I want nothing to do with it. And I'm like, no way, this is totally, you know, this is new. This is like, how can you not get it? You know, it's just like one of those incredibly stupid fights you can only have when you're 17 that will last the rest of your life.
Hardcore describes a time that's less desirable to me than what I see as the beginnings of punk rock, because hardcore was something that was it was more derivative of the earlier style, and it didn't have the original excitement, or it was just trying to be as aggressive and mean as possible, which, you know, that can only go so far.
No, I won't believe that this is all. I'm not happy. I'm not free.
I didn't know that music could be like that. I had no idea. And it was just this great funnel of place where I could put my rage and actually have like a soundtrack.
I can't take it. Can't take no more, no more, no more, no more.
In 1980, the California band Black Flag played the Longhorn.
I was like stoked on that for sure. And they played on a Wednesday night, which was called Tiger Night, and it was free beer until 10 o'clock. So it's free to get in, free beer till 10, and then Black Flag's playing.
I can't take it. It won't work. No more, no more, no more, no more. It won't work.
Downtown Minneapolis was changing. The Longhorn became Zoogies. They moved away from harder edge bands.
First Avenue, 7th Street entry had opened up, and that was pretty much the beginning of hardcore music for Minneapolis.
Looking back on it now, I can tell you this is obvious, because a bunch of bands would come to me and nobody would book them. And I said, well, there's a surplus there, go with the flow. So my calendar started filling up with punk, hardcore, new wave, whatever. I didn't dwell so much into defining their music. They did that. And the critics did that. And the record store clerks did that. They're the ones that come up with the bins. Hardcore music, speed metal.
I mean, you started to realize how hardcore punk was, like, you know, when like DOA came to town, and then you're like, okay, these guys are like not from around here, and they seem a lot more, you know, tough.
When I went and saw DOA featuring Joey Shithead at the entry, that's when hardcore starts in Minneapolis. And it was a big deal. Like, for some reason, maybe the record had showed up as Hardcore 81. Like, whoa, what's that mean? And people are slammed in. It was fairly violent. And at that time, Minneapolis was 7th Street entry, 7th and Hennepin was gnarly. It was high crime, especially when you're like 19, you don't know anything. And you know, you had like a mohawk, forget about it. I didn't have a mohawk. I had a mohawk for a week, and I could not fucking take the amount of attention you got from a mohawk in 1981. And I remember Joey Shithead, he stops and, you know, after one song just goes, "You're safer in here than you are out there." You know, and you get it right away, like, oh, right, we're in a gang. It's like a gang. You went, yeah, I found my people.
The Huskers came along. Of course, I was friends with them because Bob was my student. I lived at 24th and Pillsbury, and Bob would get off. He'd taken the bus over from McAllister, and he had his big Flying V case. And then we would, you know, I showed him stuff that he kind of sort of already knew. And after about 5 lessons, I said, "Bob, you're ready to go. Go form a band."
I said, like, what's Husker do? And he's like, they play fast. Like what? Like fast, like the Ramones? Like maybe faster. I'm like, really? Faster than the Ramones? You're like, wow.
They combine velocity with melody, with aggression, with despair, yearning. I mean, they wrapped up everything that was cool about rock and roll, even from the beginning, and they made it all their own deal.
In the early 1980s, Husker Du became the first Minnesota band to join a new subculture moving throughout North America. For a brief time, they embraced the speed, sound, and fury, and encouraged everyone around them to create Minnesota hardcore.
We'll be back for another set.
I got a job in a record store in West St. Paul. I meet Grant one day out in the food court, and we became really good friends.
What got you guys together?
What got us together?
Yeah, what got you guys together?
Records.
Records got you together.
Yeah.
Common music. You got
Record stores, yeah.
As all these new records were coming in, we're like, you know, both of us just had this voracious appetite for anything new that was punk. We're just like opening stuff up and listening to it and really getting into it. The following year, the Ramones are on the road opening for Foreigner. Grant's like, oh, this guy from McAllister College, he's going to come too. And so we all met at my house in Mendota Heights, at my mom's house. First time I'd ever really met Bob. And so we're hanging out, and my mom gets talking to Bob. Well, what are you going to do for Thanksgiving dinner? It's like, oh, I don't know. I'll probably just do something in the dorm. And my mom's like, oh, you're coming here for dinner. And I'm like, Mom, you just invited this guy to dinner. It's like, I just like met him. I don't even know this guy. So one day, Grant picks Bob up, brings him to my house. Grant's drum kit was set up in my basement. And so Bob's like, well, your drum kit's set up. Looks like Greg's got a bass. Why don't we jam? So Bob's like, hey, this is a Ramones tune. It's like, you know, these 3 chords.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And we're like, you know, this is a lot of fun. Let's keep this going. At this point, I'm working at Northern Lights on University Avenue. So the 3 of us cleaned out the basement, set up our rehearsal space, and we'd play every night until midnight, 1 o'clock, sometimes later.
The band, now known as Husker Du, got a gig at the Longhorn eager to become a part of the Twin Cities scene.
I think the first time we played the Longhorn, we got $12.50 plus drinks.
A lot of those early shows were just a handful of people, and there were definitely nights where we would clear the room.
There's some folks I know that when they first see Husker Du, oh God, these guys fucking suck. It was just a barrage of noise, obnoxious, but it was beautiful.
You know, they weren't the best, but I loved them because there wasn't anything like that in Minneapolis. And then it was just like this thing where you just are like walking in your sleep, kind of. It's like, it's kind of like a really good nightmare.
So when we first started playing at the Longhorn, we were from St. Paul. We weren't the cool kids on the block, right? And it seemed like everybody else was from the western suburbs. And they all knew each other, and they all went to high school together. And so for St. Paul kids to try to break into that, it made us hammer harder, right?
Husker Du practiced constantly, writing songs, playing shows, and now they wanted to make a record.
You know, Statues was one of the songs that we recorded for the demo for Twin Tone.
Twin Tone was the record label at the time, releasing vinyl for practically every local band from the Suicide Commandos to the Hipsters to the Suburbs.
And each one of the principals liked a different song, and there was no consensus, so they decided that Husker Du wasn't for Twin Tone. Maybe we'll do something with the Replacements instead. So that's why we called our label Reflex. It's like, all right, fine, we'll put it out ourselves. And then shortly after that, Bob discovers the Black Flag Jealous Again EP. And now Bob's just all in on hardcore. So now he starts writing faster. Seventh Street Entry had opened up in '80, and so we opened up for DOA. We opened up for the Subhumans, the punk band from Vancouver, and we opened up for all these guys, and we made an impression. And they're like, well, hey, if you're gonna get out on the road, if you need any help, here's numbers, you know. And back then, it's like people wanted to help other people get out and do it.
You know, after Statues came out, they knew, you know, I mean, I remember Mold even saying, we got to get out of here, you know, you got to play some other cities. And so it started pretty quickly.
You would have a notebook, you would start putting phone numbers in it, you would start making phone calls. Hey, I hear that you'll put on punk rock shows. And we booked what was dubbed the Children's Crusade in '81.
When they left the Twin Cities, Husker Du only had a few confirmed dates.
We started with a week in Calgary, Alberta, at an old hotel called the Calgarian Hotel. We played 6 nights in a row. From there, we went and hung out in Vancouver, stayed with Dave Gregg from DOA, and we also did some gigs with the Subhumans while we were in Vancouver. And they were like the main contact for Seattle.
Seattle was a pivotal show.
That's where Jello Biafra discovers us.
Jello Biafra was a well-known hardcore personality, and his band, the Dead Kennedys, were one of the biggest hardcore groups.
Basically got ourselves onto the bill opening for the Dead Kennedys. He's like, why don't you guys come down to San Francisco, you can stay with me. So we spent close to a month in San Francisco, staying at Jello Biafra's house. We were there long enough, he forged a rent receipt for me that I took down to the city offices and got food stamps. And we were trying to get something lined up for Los Angeles, and there wasn't anything going on. So we're like, okay, screw it. So we drive straight from San Francisco to Chicago. We drive to Minneapolis to play the entry, and that's when we recorded Land Speed Record.
Land Speed Record is generally thought of as the first Minnesota hardcore record.
They called from someplace out there and said, we want to record the show in the 7th Street Entry. Instructed me to round up some microphones and stands and maybe some EQ. I remember it as being about a week before the show, you know, because I think they'd had a lot of these songs building up for a while.
We were just like, yeah, we need to document this. The band had gotten very tight. People were like, what the fuck happened to Husker Du?
And every song was a million miles an hour. And that's kind of when I went, wow, this is a contest. See who can go the fastest.
It was a blast of sheer energy, just incomprehensible at that point in time. You never seen anything on TV that could mimic that. You never, couldn't be duplicated in a comic book or a magazine.
Land speed record, I mean, after that was done, it'd be pretty hard for somebody else to equal that.
Because Husker Du was land speed record, the fastest band in the world. Like this, you can't, they're maybe naive to think that you can't get any faster than that.
After Land Speed, then there was a lot more volatile stuff upstage, and it was a headache for them too, because they'd get hurt or smacked with mics or stepped on, or so I think as joyous as some of it was, I think some of it might have irritated them a little bit, and so, but that made for a better show. Whenever they were a little irritated, then it was really good.
Excitement around Husker Du was growing, but another band in town was also getting attention. The Replacements.
We got lumped into this kind of thing only because we played our songs fast. We weren't really, trying to be a hardcore band. We just played fast and always kind of did.
I think there was a friendly rivalry between the two bands, but I don't think it ever really got nasty the bands played together on several occasions.
We did a lot of shows with Husker Du. We played all kinds of different places. There was a lot of watching each other, but also like, yeah, we can do that. I'm sure we all thought that we were the better band.
I think each band had an eye on each other because you're the two strongest up-and-coming bands.
We didn't know that the music that was coming out of the Twin Cities was that good a quality. We didn't know Husker Du were that good at the time. We just thought, it must all be that good. But then you get down the road and you realize that's like world-class stuff.
I guess it's kind of like the Beatles and the Stones. Like, it was a Husker Du or Replacements. You weren't really both. You liked both. After hardcore, you didn't really go to see the Replacements.
What about Husker Du? Well, 3 people make a lot of noise.
They were into it, workaholics, and they were all about the frenzy of it early on.
It's a good outlet for energy. I don't know many people that can get rid of their energy the way we do.
When Husker Du first started out, they had a gang of friends that would come to their shows. They later on got the tag as the Husker Veggies.
The Husker Veggies were basically just hardcore fans of the band.
Kind of like they look like guys from the 50s, and they wrestled in front of the band. I couldn't tell if they're fighting or
They were just kind of flailing around and rolling around the floor and doing wrestling moves, like fake wrestling, because Bob was into pro wrestling.
The fact that there was a violent act going on in front of a stage, even though it was totally fake, and you realize they're pretty fast, you were like, okay, every time these guys are playing, I'm gonna go, because there's something going on.
A lot of the guys that went on to form Man-Sized Action, they were part of the Veggie, the Veggie contingent.
Man-Sized Action were the first band directly influenced by Husker Du.
At that point in those guys' career, there wasn't any separation between you being in the band and you going to see the band. It was all just part of the same scene.
I was walking across the street with Bob, and he asked me if he could produce their first record, and just not having any idea what a producer does. So I said, "What's that, Bob?" And he goes, "Well, just let me do it and you'll find out."
Bob Mould worked with many of the local bands, and Reflex Records became an important outlet for rising talent.
They were great guys. You could literally show up to watch them record or hang out when they're printing up posters or Grant laying out the covers for stuff.
Did his own T-shirts. Yeah. What he has fake name graphics. He did Hootenanny. That's Grant Hart. Yeah. Yeah, he was a really talented guy.
Grant loved music. He was a great artist. He was very funny. Grant could be the most beautiful person, heartwarming, generous, as all get out, but he can be a sarcastic asshole. Some people say, oh, he's a dick. You know what? If you think he's a dick, well, he's our dick, and that's why we love him.
Grant, he never really embraced hardcore in the same way that Bob did. You know, Grant wanted to write great pop songs.
I found it very unsatisfying. And, you know, I was willing to play them, just couldn't write them. You know, the only thing I could come up with in that idiom was, what do I want? What'll make me happy? And that's the story of a guy trying to write a hardcore song.
Those were great songs. Just that repetition and that drone they could make was like, man, most people couldn't do that shit. They were pretty sophisticated, I think. You know, sonically, there was something really going on.
I mean, more what I saw with Husker Du was just them growing leaps and bounds every time they would tour. And that's the thing, too, is like people take touring for granted, especially for hardcore bands. Touring was almost impossible.
They drove their own van, kept everything in house, stayed at cheap hotels, they'd go to buffets, and they'd come back from tour and they'd have like $6,000 in their pocket. I was like, holy fuck, you know? They took us on tour. Yeah, I remember some of those shows was just like, after the crowd left, everything would be wet. Just be like wet, like boy sweat, you know? But it was cathartic. I mean, like these shows are just fucking intense.
We did come across some scenes that were kind of dominated by some factions that were more like, hey, you're not hardcore enough. You're not. It's like, you better be like us or we're going to kick your ass. We're like, man, that's a bunch of crap. It's like people should just do what they want to do. Grant writes, it's not funny anymore, right? So we actually got our first East Coast tour booked. We're thinking like, crap, we've never been East. It's gonna be like it was when we first started out going out West, where it's like, nobody knows who we are, we're gonna play to nobody, you know, it's whatever. And the first show was in Boston, and we got out there and the club was packed. And we're like, what's going on? And they're like, college radio.
Husker Du used to practice over on the east side of St. Paul. They had rented a church over there. And so, you know, we would go over there and hang out every once in a while. I remember sitting in the church watching them like write the songs and rehearse Zen Arcade. And, you know, just thinking, you know what, these guys are really starting to do something different. It's pretty amazing.
It's like, okay, Bob's done the hardcore thing. Now Bob wants to move on and evolve as a songwriter.
They moved on. They were just like, we're kind of into playing music rather than like, you know, just perpetuating our genre of like anger and speed.
I went to see Husker Du in like probably 85. I walked in, I knew Husker Du. I had Land Speed record and Metal Circus, but they were, it just so happened I walked in, they were playing that Birds cover. I was like, I just walked right back out. I mean, I was like, this isn't my thing. I mean, I appreciate it now. I like psychedelic rock for what it is, but At the time, I was just like, I was like 15. I just wanted to hear hardcore. I wanted to slam and like jump off the stage. And these guys are playing this melodic, intricate harmonies, psychedelic rock. That's my parents' music, man. Like, I went out of here. So I drank a Slurpee in the parking lot, skateboarded with my friends, and missed most of the set.
Because then even the big bands from that subculture, suddenly now they're playing for a different audience. Like the Replacements and Husker Du. I'm like, these guys are all turning on us, man.
Yeah, you keep evolving, and your fans hopefully will evolve with you, but there will always be the fans that aren't going to, and they'll be mad that you left them at some sort of altar or whatever.
They were smart guys, and they did move on, you know. It was like watching, I guess, like watching your home team, you know. Yeah, we were real happy about those guys.
When Zen Arcade came out, I think there was that beautiful moment, and then there was like, they're gonna leave us, they're going to bigger things. A lot of bands had broken up, and a lot of people were moving into that adult life, and everything's gonna get big now, and everything's gonna change.
You know, when we signed to Warner Brothers, it was like sellouts, you know, but, you know, hey, all artists evolve, all art evolves, and really that's the true essence of punk, right? It's doing what you want to do, how you want to do it.
I mean, when I moved to LA, the first job I had was at a record store. If they found out I was from Minneapolis, they always would say, why is the music so damn good from Minneapolis?
We have 7 months of winter, and what else is there to do besides kill yourself? I mean, you know, or become a hardcore drug addict and alcoholic. You just start playing music.
Somebody found a guitar at a garage sale, you know, so you start plucking away a little bit, you know. Another guy starts plucking away. Two guys that don't know what the fuck they're doing get together and start plucking away together.
Don't be afraid to lead. Try taking charge. Cause once you do it, next time it's not so hard.
We were listening to this band rehearse outside their house, and they happened to be the Hipsters. Bill and Ernie Batson.
The Hipsters from Northeast Minneapolis drew a straight line between 1960s garage rock and the current punk scene.
We'd go over to the Batson's house. They would have all these records for us. Every time we went over, it was like a record exchange, you know? Like, okay, here's the Buzzcocks, you know, here's Dr. Feelgood, here's all these albums, you know? And we'd go home, listen to them, soak everything up, learn all the songs, start writing our own songs. Hardcore was brand new at the time, and that to me was always the most interesting thing. It was like the new, the innovative, the exploration, you know?
And I was into your basic punk rock stuff, you know, the Clash, the Ramones, but when I heard hardcore, when I heard bands like the Dead Kennedys, and when I finally got hip to the Bad Brains and stuff like that, I just loved it, and I loved the lyrics, I loved what they said. I just loved the rawness of it.
It was immediate. When I first heard it, I wanted to do that. Like, I literally kind of quit playing with the guys I'd been playing with up to that point, and then like sought out other kids in town that were into that, which strangely there was like a group.
And then the Blue Hippos, you know, like all teenage things, you know, they last like 9 months, maybe 12 months, you know, and everybody kind of gets tired of it.
A lot of us hung out together because we were all musicians and we were all, you know, starting bands.
I mean, you didn't really have a choice because it's not like you could pick from 14 people as to, geez, who should we have plays? Clarence? Brad? No, I don't like his hair. You know, it wasn't like that. It was like, you know, there's only 4 of you. So that's just enough for a band. There you go.
We formed Toddlockin' with Tom Hazelmeyer.
The name was a Yiddish phrase for laughing at death. You know, making light of something that shouldn't laugh at, which is one of the things that drew me to punk rock and hardcore in the first place.
I think there was a certain amount of discontent, disdain for popular culture.
You were definitely on the mutant fringe.
Like me, I felt like an outsider, but I also felt like I was cool because I was hip to this stuff and nobody knows about it, you know. But I used to just walk around high school like, hey, I'm in a band, I'm playing bars.
One of the things that we definitely jumped into, along with a lot of other bands at that moment, was like the need for speed, the need to, play 1,000 miles an hour.
The only other band that I can remember doing it at that particular time was Husker Du, and they were at the forefront of all of that.
Trickles down, it starts at the top. Here's Suicide Commandos, here's Husker Du, and then it's just like all these people who watched them and saw them, and their friends doing it because their friends did it, and their friends doing it.
It's more eclectic than you would think. There was so many other bands that were not playing this real particular kind of hardcore music.
But yeah, there was a lot of great music from all types of genres and all over. I mean, it was a great time for music.
You gotta come see this bar. It's a place where they all are. Take my car, it's not far. They think that they're stars.
I mean, that's kind of the thing about Minneapolis. I mean, every band kind of got rewarded for not just going 1, 2, 3, 4, like skate. And there was like this really freaks were welcome kind of scene. And there was some interesting stuff being done.
We were such subset. I mean, you get 200 people out, that was a great night. You get 100 people out, that's a stellar night still. You get 30 people, it's a Tuesday. And Rifle Sport was like, it wasn't a punk band, we were a post-punk band. Oh, I remember the things we wanted to do. We wanted to get free beer. And we wanted to be in the scene.
I thought the scene was extremely welcoming. Geez, I never had that in high school. People thought I was a dork. Now they think I'm cool. Wow, I like this punk rock stuff. Growing up, if I wanted to go see a band, I'd have to go to see an arena show. You'd walk in, it'd be this enormous room, the band's way over there. But then it was like, I'm in the entry and it's like 6 feet away from the band. You're right there and everyone around you is dancing and interacting with the band, and it's like, this is a lot more fun. People lumped us in with hardcore, so we wound up playing a lot of hardcore shows and being considered hardcore, which we never really felt like we were, but hey, if it's getting some publicity, it's like, yeah, we're hardcore.
And we'd tour through the Midwest, and there'd be posters, and it would say, St. Paul Hardcore, or from Chicago, Rifle Sport, Hardcore, and they'd have like a drawing from artists from California that they pasted on the poster, and it was all like generic.
Chris was probably more into it than the rest of us, but yeah, we weren't, but we were. We sat on the edge of hardcore.
Any musical movement that has an impact usually is because a lot of like-minded people were coming upon the same conclusion, the same idea at the same time.
I remember in like 1980, I wrote a song and I went, it'd be really cool is just to play this as fast as humanly possible.
And when you get a band that comes along that's called Loud Fast Rules, that sort of is declarative, right, of what everybody was trying to do in those days.
They played fast stuff, but they were not hardcore, and I would say they're like maybe punk rock in the traditional sense of like when punk rock could be a wide variety of things.
Dave played saxophone in the early days with our band. We did Hot Pants by James Brown. It was like we were all over the place on purpose. I mean, that's what we wanted to do.
We would play some hardcore, We'd play some Sex Pistols. We'd play something a little different, or like, you know how the Ramones would cover like weird old 60s pop songs.
And we had Pat Morley was our drummer, who was technically very, very good. But I think Pat Morley really wanted the band to be hardcore, so he turned everything into it was just like really on top of the beat. He started like writing songs, like kind of like 2-minute just hardcore songs and stuff. That's the last thing the drummer does in the band, by the way. Oh, I wrote some songs, you know.
We changed the name from Loud Fast Rules because it was some other band's slogan. But that's not why. I just thought it was too, I think the word is pigeonholing. And besides, it had rules in it, which I'm like, I don't even like rules.
If we had gone away and never had any success in the 90s, I think people would have remembered that era of Loud Fast Rules and Soul Asylum differently, because we were kind of a messy, scrappy little fucking shit show of a band that was a whirling dervish for sure.
I sort of saw the band as part of that scene, like all the bands that we were playing with, and there was maybe half the bands are very devoted to every song being super nasty and super hardcore.
The idea for Red Meat was basically, because I was listening to a lot of Iron Maiden and Motorhead, was to be like metal punk, you know, but through hardcore.
Red Meat was hardcore. they were like, you know, hardcore.
I enjoyed them a lot. That was a really grungy, dirty, loud, blasting sound, but they were also funny. I mean, the fact that they called themselves Red Meat
Was this grinding, loud, screaming rock. But for me, it was like the perfect antidote that could kind of capture my spirit.
We just wanted to be really loud, and that's really all we wanted to do.
That is the credo of hardcore, trying to make it but don't know what we want to. You have no idea what you're doing. I'm sober, and it was just like, you know, what do you do with this crazy energy? What do you do with it? So punk rock was perfect because it was like romper room of aggression. You know, it was like kind of a contained force. You know, we were into a little bit of graffiti and that kind of stuff, but it wasn't really like we were out trying to hurt people.
The best part of that band was Toby Deal was in that band, who was like the only real punk in Minneapolis, and he was the drummer.
Toby was a rebel, a real rebel.
Toby was the kind of guy that slept in his clothes next to a tray full of burning cigarettes. I think he probably lived in the basement, like in the punk room.
Oh, you know, he would piss his pants and not change clothes because he figured, why bother? I'm just going to piss my pants again. He'd do that for days.
We were not liked. We were hated. That's what you should be hated. But we weren't hated for like, you know, like cutting chickens' heads off or anything like that. We were hated probably because we had Toby in our band and we couldn't play at the 7th Street entry. We were barred from the entry for life if we had Toby in our band because he slit the tires on a cop car that was parked in front of the entry for no apparent reason. You know, with a switchblade. He always had a switchblade on him too. He was very punk rock. And so, you know, we were the Goofy's Upper Deck band, you know, by default.
Hi, we are cruising downtown. We're gonna get off the old spots where all those punkers used to hang out.
By 1982, hardcore had arrived in the Twin Cities. Dozens of bands are forming, and soon there are multiple options for places to play.
It seemed like there was always a show. I mean, always a show somewhere, every weekend.
The fact that there were more than one place to play in town besides the Minneapolis was good because it gave a little bit of competition.
Duffy's tried to do hardcore shows, didn't always go well for them.
Duffy's was kind of hit or miss. One night it would be like volleyball night, you know, and then it would be like the Circle Jerks.
7th Street entry, right here.
7th Street entry felt like a doghouse. First Avenue was always the money that made the entry possible.
First Avenue was whatever. We got in there when we could get in there, and it was nice, but it wasn't like our clubhouse like Goofy's was.
Up here is where Goofy's Upper Deck used to be.
The music scene definitely needed a place like Goofy's. It's like the hardcore acts were better suited to the Upper Deck.
Hey, you know what? I shower regularly, so no one has to shower me for me. Yeah. Thank you.
Goofy's Upper Deck was downtown Minneapolis, right? A couple blocks from First Avenue.
At that point in time, that end of downtown was so deserted.
Part of downtown that, you know, if you're a kid from the suburbs, it was a little scary, you know, just a little bit, just, you know, taking the bus downtown and walking down there.
Next door was a place called Market Barbecue. And upstairs, they had this big space, and it wasn't being used.
It was just a space that someone just handed you and said, make something awesome. You guys have to supply the PA, we'll put a bartender in the space.
It was a perfect home for punk rock. It didn't need to be anything other than a place that we could hear our music and not get hassled by cops.
It was a paradise for an 18-year-old in a punk band. It was just great. It was the seediest, you know, all the places that your mom told you not to go were just right in that sort of realm.
It was a safe spot for everybody, right? Everybody felt comfortable. It was like, all right, let your hardcore freak flag fly and let's go.
This is amazing. We can do whatever we want. And whatever we wanted to do was put on the best punk rock shows we could do every night of the week.
Goofy's Upper Deck was pretty amazing. And that's Fred Gardner. Fred Gardner needs to be a big part of this because that guy, he was from like a contingent of bouncers from Duffy's, where a lot of shows were at, where you could get your ass kicked by those bouncers pretty fast, and he was the good cop versus the bad cop, right?
Wonderful guy, big fucking dude, looked like the, you know, Coca-Cola machine.
Fred Gardner came into the bar and sold himself to Dan.
Dan Kotlow was the owner of Goofy's.
It kind of came as a surprise to all of us that he was able to talk Dan into the music upstairs, right? It was a strip joint at the time, you know, and how's that gonna mix, right?
From the beginning, there were tensions between Goofy's and the Upper Deck.
I was a bartender there. The Goofy's Upper Deck. You know, Husker Du playing 90 miles an hour. So the guy that owned the place, Dan Cartlow, I went, what the fuck is this shit? What is this crap?
All along, they've never really fully liked what we were doing. It's been a slow process to educate the people downstairs of what the hell music is all about and what's going on. The first time that people started thrashing and slam dancing, the bouncers equated with violence, were ready to move in on the people. I had to grab their guys and say, look, no.
I think he really just saw the enthusiasm that we all had for these bands and you know, really wanted us to be able to enjoy the music. And he was a big supporter, and I think he looked the other way on a lot of that stuff because he knew it was important and it was important to us. He just let a lot of us underage kids in, you know.
It was crazy back then. You were younger, you could get away with murder, you could get into a bar. It was a free-for-all. It was a fun free-for-all.
I was like hanging out, you know, just a young kid hanging out, and Fred's like, here, take tickets. So I would take tickets, and I would, matter of fact, I was checking IDs, 17 years old, checking IDs.
Well, you know, I was a doorman there for a long time when I was like 16 years old.
I love there's a lot of underage people checking IDs. That was good.
So we eventually eliminated the bouncers, the bartenders, and just about everyone there that was connected with Goofy's.
And Fred, he approached me and said, yes, I understand that you have a lot of connections in the punk rock scene, and I was wondering if you'd be at all interested in helping me bring some bands through here. There was this woman that I was dealing with. Her specialty was like British punk rock. She said that she might be bringing Discharge over. You know, I just blurted out. It's like, oh, we got to have that here.
And it was the first American tour, and it was like, fuck, Discharge? And you know, like, you had their records, and every song's about nuclear war, and every song sounds like a fucking nuclear war.
I remember Bob telling me specifically, he says, if you get that show, Husker Du's on that bill, and we go on right before them, we are going to destroy those guys.
For some reason, I became competitive. Felt like there's people setting up in camps, like Pete Davis set up in the Husker Du camp.
As good as Discharge was that night, and they were good, but they got their asses handed to them.
So Husker Du opens, and they tried too hard. They try to blow them away, and they didn't. You know, Discharge is better.
You know, there were definitely some pretty epic hardcore shows that went down up at Goofy's.
Articles of Faith, Youth Brigade, Social Distortion.
To see the names on there was ridiculous. Suicidal Tendencies, Big Boys.
Saw Meat Puppets there first time they played here.
Jodie Foster's Army.
So many bands played, it was amazing.
Okay, when we made our mark was when Black Flag came in from California.
Gimme, gimme, gimme! I need some more! Gimme, gimme, gimme! Don't ask what for! 1, 2, 3, 4! Stand here like a loaded gun!
It was so crowded, like you couldn't even move really, and sea of just humans, and everybody was like touching me. There's no space, the whole place. And so that was the only show I remember being on that back wall. There was a little ledge, and standing on that ledge to just watch it. It was so intense. It was so good.
Minutemen opening before them. I didn't realize how fucking great they were going to be live, and they were phenomenal live. And Deep was like jumping up and down.
It put us on the map, you know, as far as the Upper Deck being a viable competition to the entry.
We were the house band for a short while. Fred, I don't think we could play at any other place in Minneapolis at that time, and for some reason, Fred got a hold of us. He liked us. He liked me, which was kind of odd for back then. I was kind of abrasive, I think.
Willful Neglect were really good. They could rock. They could play really well. Probably scarier than any of the other local hardcore bands.
They're not a bunch of drug-crazed, violent, idiots. They're regular people just having a good time. We just don't want to fit in with the fashion crowd or anything like that. This is more real. This is more street level, more down to the roots of regular people.
The guys in Willful Neglect all were very, very working class. I grew up with these guys. They're the sons of plumbers. Okay, they were like driving trucks.
They showed up at the Upper Deck, and it was like, who is this? Who is this? And everybody was like, who are they? Because they came in not as like one guy or two guys, they came as this huge group. It almost felt like a gang.
The majority of the people that followed Willful Neglect around didn't even like punk rock. They just liked to party and caused chaos. And they knew if Willful Neglect was there, it was going to go off.
They were really into this. We're East St. Paul. East St. Paul. And I'm like, I don't know, what's East St. Paul?
East Side Slam Club. I remember there was a fight with Social Distortion, one of the St. Paul punks.
We were out there slam dancing, and my friend Mike says, "That dude just kicked you in the head," referring to Mike Ness. I didn't feel it, but that's all he had to say. So I turned around and I flipped off Mike Ness. Next thing I know, his guitar's off, and he jumps right on me off of the stage. And we're battling it out on the floor.
They wanted to slam dance and beat ass, and they wanted to be violent.
And they kind of got me off the dance floor. They would hurt you. And it's like, don't you understand? We're just trying to have fun.
It was kind of exciting too to have that going on. To have, this rival set of people over in St. Paul who, they did their punk rock a little differently than we did somehow.
Willful Neglect were invited to play on Kitten, a compilation featuring bands that played the Upper Deck. It was organized by Bob Mould and Reflex Records.
We had a bunch of bands. It was 2 nights at the Upper Deck. Everybody came and played for free.
Recorded it straight to 2-track, live to 2-track, and had each band play about 20 minutes each.
That ended up becoming the Kitten compilation, which became a tape, which is now on CD.
But there were a lot of great bands, I mean, God, everybody played on it. It was like everybody in your neighborhood was, on that record, and that was pretty fun, Actually, I love Bob Mould for that kind of shit. I mean, he really did, build a world,
A lot of people said we were like the house band of the Upper Deck. We did a 10-song, 15-minute set, and everybody was like, "You guys do 10 songs in 15 minutes?" That was the hardcore scene, and that was hardcore music.
Final Conflict was the best hardcore band, and believe me, I didn't like that at all. I was very jealous because they were the best. They had that buzzsaw guitar. They had 2 brothers. They were more cohesive.
They were tough fucking kids. They were everything that we wanted to be, I think.
We saw Husker Du, and we saw the Replacements, and they had their thing. And Final Conflict felt more like, all right, these are street kids. They're angry, and they don't know what they're fucking angry about. Yeah, I don't really know if they know what they're talking about. They're loose cannon, and then to me, that was appealing. To me, that was like they're making their noise, and they're going to be loud, they're going to be heard. That was dangerous, and that was good, and that I liked.
We closed the Upper Deck. My band, Final Conflict, closed the Upper Deck, and that was really, really sad.
A place like that is doomed to eventually fail. You just have to have fun with it because it's going to go down.
Dan Kotlow grew tired of the punks above his bar and ended his agreement with Fred Gardner.
All we had was punk rock after a while, and I know Dan wanted more of a mainstream venue coming up there. And then people were hanging downstairs, and it made a few people uncomfortable. The mix of people just never worked out. Blue collar and punk rockers, it just never matched.
If you just tuned in, we're talking about the end of the Upper Deck and some events that happened.
Most memorable thing is the last week of shows before they shut it down.
Second night was a thrash bash. The headline band was Final Conflict. And during that time, through the evening, a few things got trashed. The bathroom got trashed. Someone knocked out one of the commodes. Somebody threw a chair through a window.
Fell off the second story window, went through the awning. It was Market Barbecue where people were sitting outside, I think, eating food.
So, it's like that nihilistic attitude of like, well, screw it all. Let's just really trash the place.
When the Market Barbecue people who owned the lease on the building found out about it, they came up. And then shortly after that, orders came down to close the club up. And they brought a staff from downstairs, and they wouldn't listen to too much reason. They were there to shut it down and get everybody out within a few minutes, and were prepared to use a lot of force.
It was so negative and crazy that night.
I mean, we were all mad because this is our place, man. This is our thing, and they were closing it.
And I tried to appeal them to let Final Conflict on. As they hadn't played yet, the audience was there to see Final Conflict.
We play our first song, and then Fred comes over and says to our lead singer, Noel Morgan, you guys just do one more song, get off. Somebody threw a chair out the window, they're closing it down.
Fred told me with about 3 big bouncers behind him with wine bottles, I think, and pool cue sticks, that we had one song left.
The song ends and we go right into the next song. I was sitting there playing, and the bouncer's sitting there go, you guys got to cut. And we kept playing. So he pulls the plug, and I'm still playing. They look at me like, stop.
When they did that, Sort of a minor riot ensued.
A smoke bomb was thrown. People were tipping over chairs and tables. They were really pissed off at the sponsor.
You realize they didn't think it was funny. Like, we were like, ha ha ha, we're being crazy and wild. And they're like, we're gonna kill all of you.
I got sucker punched by one of the managers, who was a high school friend of mine. That was bad. Bad, bad, bad.
I can't breathe in the smoke. I run out. We get outside.
What the fuck just happened? And then we turn around, open the door to the street, and the whole street is closed off by cops.
The cops come and said, this is unlawful assembly. You got to leave.
In the midst of it all, a friend of mine, Tim Daly, said something to the cop and made him mad, and another cop jumped on him and proceeded to slam his head against the cement by his hair and said, "Slam dance to this."
And then at the end of it, it was like when it calmed down and everybody was trying to get in their cars, it was kind of one of those, what the fuck just happened? And people started laughing because it was so ridiculous.
It shut it down. It was the end for the Upper Deck.
Now it's a parking ramp.
That club was cool. We had a lot of fun there, and it was too bad, but you always felt like something else would pop up. And I don't think anything really replaced it.
There were just really 3 or 4 of us at my high school in St. Louis Park that were the punk rockers, and we'd just stand outside and smoke our cigarettes and shiver and just kind of avoid everybody else and know that our friends were not here. You just sought out the other freaks, you know? You just sought out people who looked like you and made friends that way. A group of us one day skipped school to go have lunch with Devo, a little bit pre-hardcore, and ended up meeting people from other high schools who were also skipping school to come down and meet Devo. They were also the only 3 or 4 punk rockers at their high school.
Non-conformists, maybe. Just not being like the crowd. Just trying something different, being yourself.
Another place where you'd meet people is at Loring Park. They would do movies and music in the park. And so all these local bands, maybe not necessarily even a punk band, but everybody would show up to that. All those things were really crucial in making the scene explode, making more people get involved, and then that turns into people forming bands and making their own fanzines and setting up hall shows and all that kind of stuff.
The one thing that I recall the most about that time in Minneapolis, and it's still really special to me when I think about it now, is that we really had a really great community that all hung out together. We all played together. There was a real healthy camaraderie.
Oh, I'm gonna go to this party, it might be Paul Westerberg jamming with some people in the basement, and everybody's, it's just like, it wasn't always great music, but it was a thing.
It was the energy, and it was the fun, and it was the excitement. It just triggered more excitement. Because we're all young and everyone liked to party, and everyone liked to stay up until 5 in the morning, telling stories and having a beer. And so it was a smaller scene, and because it was smaller, it was more intimate.
We all started hanging out at the Big House, if you recall the Big House.
The Big House was a 7-bedroom house in South Minneapolis, leased by Lori Barbero.
Whenever a band would show up, no matter where it was, they're like, oh, you need a place to stay, you can stay at Lori Barbero's. And I'm talking every band, and sometimes there'd be 2 or 3 bands staying at my house. There are hundreds of people that became my friends that I'd never met before, or even heard of their band that stayed at my house.
what they did is they had a lot of parties on Fridays and Saturdays and stuff like that, had bands in the basement. It was fun times.
So many parties in that place. So many.
And that was like this mysterious place that you heard about that, you know, everybody lived at, and Laurie Barbero lived there, and all kinds of other people. And I remember even going to a basement show that Articles of Faith played in the basement, and that was pretty exciting.
I liked having shows because I love music. Music is my life. You know, I even just as a fan, just as someone who loves music, loves going to shows, loves standing right in the front so you can feel everything pound off of your chest.
The Big House, of course, I'm sure is mentioned in all this crap, because that was pretty much the headquarters of almost everything, because all minor, there's a Minor Threat show too. God.
One of the best shows still that I've ever seen in my life was when Laurie Barbero set up Minor Threat.
I was 21, I think. I had friends that were younger than myself, and they couldn't get into shows, and I'm sure I was like, oh, you want to see a show? I'll put together a show. I mean, I rented the space, I found insurance, got some other bands to play, got a PA together. I mean, I put all of that together.
Minor Threat and Purple Hearts Club is fucking huge.
And they were great live.
You know, just seeing that band who all of us really kind of worshipped, and then, you know, being able to buy their 7-inch EPs right out of the back of their van.
It was almost a week of having Minor Threat in town. Like, it was a big week, and it was the only week the Big House was like, went low key with the drugs.
And it was boring that night when they stayed there, of course, because they didn't have sex, they didn't drink.
At the time, you know, this was everything, and it was everything to be able to be a part of that and to be able to interact with the people's records you were buying and listening to. It was really just something that felt really, really important.
A network was growing across the United States. Bands could connect with bands, bands could book tours, information was accessible.
You know, maybe there might be some buzz about the band that, like, maybe somebody either saw them somewhere else before or read something in a fanzine, but that's like how people found out about stuff.
The fanzines were really crucial for all of us finding out about bands and who to listen to and what was happening in other cities.
I do like the fanzine culture. I still love the fanzine culture. You could make one yourself if you wanted to. You're like, oh, this magazine sucks. I'm gonna make one my own, right? And maybe yours suck too. You know, everything you read should come out of, you know, somebody's hands, I think.
Pete Davis and Ron Clark basically started the first hardcore fanzine in Minneapolis, right? Mere Flesh magazine.
The idea was basically, let's bring an awareness to the shit that we're into, since the city pages and the Reader are never going to write about it.
There wasn't the coverage that there was for new wave and punk rock. And when there's a void and you can fill that void, it's enticing. I was always into art and always wanted to participate and do things and share whatever I was into with other people. I couldn't play an instrument, so I figured I would draw and use a lot of my friends who had similar talents as well.
What it did was it documented everything that was going on in the aorta of Minneapolis as far as the music scene goes.
And at the time we were watching a lot of horror movies.
Mommy, can I go on in? Delta 9!
It was a skull, you know, it was simple graphics. The art was like the music, raw and simple and available for anybody to step up and participate in. We had cartoonists, we had photographers, finding artists to to do covers, and people in our community are friends. Everybody had something to contribute.
For me, I mean, that definitely was a draw into it too, is that hardcore had its own look. It was all about the Xerox machine. But it was like the stuff that was at hand, the rub-off lettering, the old typewriter in the closet.
These are chart pack Letraset letters. We used a lot of these for like flyer layouts and stuff.
It was accessible to all of us because when you made posters, you had to cut shit out of other things and then glue them to a page. But it was all comic books and horror movies.
There was like a look to the whole thing that was a totally homemade, non-schooled, non-traditional graphic design clusterfuck. You know, pile of bodies in Zimbabwe. Oh, there's a photo I'm going to use for a hardcore flyer. That'll piss somebody off.
But we didn't think of it as appropriation. We just thought everything belonged to everybody.
Fast, sloppy, and move on to the next thing. You know, you weren't writing a thesis. You were making a flyer for a show in a garage that was probably going to get shut down by the cops.
So here's a copy of the last year Flesh cover I did. About 84, 85, I stopped my involvement. The magazine was changing. I was changing. I had been living and working together with Peter for so long that I had enough and just decided, hey, I'm done.
The big thing that split Ron and I up from doing the zine together is I didn't want to continue doing things for free. The money aspect came into it. Well, you know, film costs money. Printing costs money. Buying drinks for a band to interview them costs money. By dint of working at shit, by like actually applying myself, some of my stuff was monetizing itself.
Peter Davis was singled out in the Twin Cities scene for making money off of hardcore.
And Pete Davis is all about hardcore, you know? He almost like he looked at it like Amway. Like it was like a way he's gonna get rich, and like...
Nobody ever saw a guy like Pete Davis in Minneapolis before. Nobody was ready for a Pete Davis in Minneapolis. We were still finding our way and making a community. Pete Davis saw an opportunity, and we thought he was an ass because he would just speak his mind and getting things done. He knew how to get things done, but we thought we never dealt with somebody like that before.
And so the interpretation, the passive-aggressive interpretation of that is like, oh, sell out, money, 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 money. And that wasn't it at all.
You cannot make money from hardcore without becoming a target.
If you made money from punk, you were fucking sold. That's what sold out means, man. You cashed it in.
I could book shows for bands, I could fucking sell advertising from a magazine, I could do freelance writing, and do this, that, and the other thing. All things that I enjoy doing, that I'm already doing, why not eke out a living at it?
And that's the thing about Pete Davis, he put together a lot of this shit. You know, there's a lot of things about him, that people talk shit about him, all that stuff, but he was a doer.
But then once you got to know his method of the madness, then it was like, okay.
No illusions that I was going to get rich or anything. They had nothing to do with it. Just meant being able to survive and do the things that I wanted to do.
Peter Davis continued publishing Your Flesh magazine for close to 20 years. Of all the people who contributed to the Minneapolis hardcore scene, Terry Katzman may have been the most instrumental.
Well, everybody's heard about the bird.
From running sound to putting out records, Terry had his fingers in it all. Terry was most visible at Orfolk Joke Opus, the record store where he worked.
It was the place where you went to socialize, talk about music, learn about music.
I was a regular at Orfolk.
he would help. Terry Katzman would certainly help. You look through the bins, and I'm the one who fed as much punk rock as I could to everybody in St. Paul. You know, going to Orfolk and fishing out all them singles and stuff. They were the only place you were going to hear that would have been in Minneapolis.
You know, it was like going to your post office, because Katzman would know what you liked, so he'd have all these tapes of bands, right? And I walked in one day and he gave me like the Stranglers Live and Hope and Anchor. He goes, nobody else here likes this, but you will. And I was like, thank you very much.
While working at Orfolk, Terry branched out late at night as a sound engineer for 2 new bands.
I started as a sound person in the 7th Street entry, working with Husker Du and the Replacements, both sort of on and off.
Tried to make sure I got to work on time after a long night of staying up and going to rock shows and not getting enough sleep.
Before long, Katzman was working exclusively for Husker Du and became a crucial part of their Reflex record label.
It just sort of all snowballed, where I was the only one that could really do stupid shit for them because they were getting too busy. Go to the office, we had a little office, get the mail, make sure there's no checks for any merchandise that were in there. That was one of my duties. Whatever they needed done, if they needed me to do something, I did it. Very mundane task, so very unglamorous.
Terry Katzman, for example, he did sound at a lot of our garage production shows, and it was just, you know, he wanted to be supportive of what we were doing, and you know, he was just one of those local guys that, you know, I'm sure hardcore punk wasn't his favorite thing in the world, but you know, he put out records and he ran the record store and he came and helped us. He helped us do sound for shows that we would do.
Whittier Park on 26th and Grand for the summer of '84 and '85 was the hardcore venue. Michelle Strauss was the head of Garage Productions, and that's where she had the majority of her shows.
Garage Productions was a group of friends, about anywhere from 5 to 10 people, who got together to put on all ages shows at various halls in Minneapolis. We just decided, you know, why don't we put on hall shows? Why don't we see what we could do and see if we could get this together? So I would just look up people in the back of Maximum Rock and Roll, and I'd hear they were touring, and I would call them up and say, you know, can you play Minneapolis? We would rent a hall, we'd print up flyers, and we'd put on a show. Generally, we made no money. We would barely make enough money to pay the bands. In fact, sometimes we had to like mop up the place to get our deposit back to pay the band that were waiting in their van to leave town. And then we had connections with some of the local bands like Outcry and Skullfuck.
Somebody like Michelle Strauss, who ran Garage Productions, which was just her, just blood, sweat, and tears putting on these shows. Michelle, to me, was like a grown woman. But I mean, she was, you know, when you're that age, when you're 14, somebody who's like 17 seems really old, you know?
But Michelle, in her fucking infinite coolness and her way and her participation and her like power, booked us with like Raw Power, booked us with Iron Cross. She booked us with so many bands, and she was so great. And these were the people that I felt like that were welcoming, not all this macho competitive shit.
Also did a show with Corrosion of Conformity. We paid them $20. You know, they became a pretty big speed metal band, you know, but at the time they were like grateful for the $20 we were able to pay them. But just being able to have these bands that we love, these bands whose records we bought, just be able to hang out and talk to them and then have them play a show for all the fans in the Twin Cities. And it was just a great feeling to be able to get together as a community and put on these shows. And, you know, we filled a little bit of a void. It was only that summer and into the fall.
It was wonderful, and I love Michelle Strauss. To this day, we share a love of cats, I think, or dogs. She has dogs. And,
you know, we had a great run, you know. We put on a bunch of shows, and it really felt good. I mean, it's some great memories that I'll never forget.
About like 6 months to a year that hardcore was just hardcore prime in Minnesota. And after about that year and a half thrust, you know, everybody was tired of it and splintered off into a million different directions.
People were just like done with that formula because it became a formula. At first it was like everyone stumbling into this room and being into the same idea, but after a while it just kind of petered out.
But you know, all music becomes shitty, doesn't it? After a little while, it gets played out and it's stupid and it's boring, and you know, so we liked that music for, you know, a couple of years, and we were deeply committed to that music, but then, Jesus, you think, the rest of you are fucking assholes, I'm out.
It goes like this, you know, and then everybody's wearing a mohawk, and then they're not, and then some dude grows his hair out, and then everybody else does. It just was this morphing second wave of punk rock.
In the beginning, the promise of hardcore was it could be anything.
We all considered ourselves punk rock hardcore, but it's not what you think of as hardcore, because not every band was trying to play as fast as they can with a skinhead and sound like, I'm a hardcore band.
Hardcore at that point in time wasn't solidified into a generic block. It was still forming, so you could have bizarre creativity going on, which was, to me, was incredible. The Meat Puppets showing up was a hardcore band. It sounded like the Germs meet Captain Beefheart, you know, it was insane. It was like trying to wrap your head around it was a trip, but that was hardcore.
It felt like punk rock gave everybody license to do whatever. For me, the formula was that there's no formula. And that's what was exciting to me. We were doing noise before there was anyone to copy, that's for sure. There was no one doing what we did, especially to not tune, you know? And that was the deal, was like, well, I didn't know how, and I didn't care. It was like getting a box of paints. You know, like, you don't know how to paint. So, but are you gonna not paint? Fuck no, you're gonna paint. And that's what we did. We made noise. I remember how hard it was for us to break into the scene. So we played with Corrosion of Conformity. I mean, we fucking opened for DRI. And it was an all-ages show in the main room. Fuck, I almost died at that show. Get the fuck off the stage. Like, you're out of tune, you're not playing hardcore. Like, we're here for DRI.
It starts out as a small scene and builds, and then becomes kind of almost, it feels like almost like a trap.
we must have rules and more rules, and you're not hardcore, and that's not at 140 beats per minute. You are officially not hardcore, which literally started happening through the genius of Maximum Rock and Roll.
Maximum Rock and Roll came along and kind of put a stamp on it and go, this is hardcore.
And totally like stagnated the creativity and turned it into a dead end.
So when that stuff happened, when I started to feel pushback about how we didn't fit, to me, that was disappointing. That was even a little heartbreaking.
The quickest way to get a punk to do something is to tell him he can't.
All right, don't cross this line. This is bad juju. And you're like, okay, I'm crossing that line. I'm doing that bad juju. It was a total reaction to like, okay, now this is getting stale. And this is where it's funny to think back now because you're talking about a year and a half. That stuff's so over. It's over.
The thing that we started relating to was garage music, you know? I mean, things that were happening in the 60s, it was DIY, it was do-it-yourself. We were identifying with that. And so we started playing more psychedelic influenced music, you know?
You know, we were throwing in weird dashes of Blue Cheer's first record and Hendrix and messing around with other stuff that we loved, weird post-punk things. I mean, this was great because it was like mixing it up and allowing people to kind of step out of their predetermined roles.
Tom wanted to do Blue Cheer songs, so I turned him on to Blue Cheer. Probably the first noise metal band from 1967. And they asked, hey, Dale, do you know the words to that song? I went, yeah. Do you also know the words to Fire by Jimi Hendrix? I went, yeah. Can you come sing it with us at practice? Sure. Never sang a note in my life.
Thinking we were going to an Autos Chemical Lounge show, which was the weirdest thing I ever experienced because the feedback was just grinding into my head, and I was just like, I don't know if this is okay. Like, maybe we made the wrong decision. And this fucking kid wailing, and just feedback. This Hobbit. I love that guy. I love that guy right away. Like, I was like, he was older, but I loved him. He was nasty.
There was like a lot of hardcore bands that all of a sudden, overnight, were just like, that's it, we're done. We're doing metal, we're doing, you know, post-punk, Art Damage, you know, whatever it was, you saw a lot of people getting out of that particular fry pan.
As far as like hardcore itself, yeah, I mean, I think it became a blind alley really, really fast.
It became generic, you know? And you could go to Cleveland, you could go to Dayton, Ohio, and there'd be a band just like that there.
That's kind of what it's about, is being limiting. You know, it's like being, well, this little world of like, yeah, this is the only thing, shit that's good, man. All that other shit sucks. Yeah. Well, okay, well.
I basically just got bored with hardcore. I got tired of living, breathing, drawing, working, promoting hardcore music. I think for the most part I overdosed and then just got burnt and wanted to move on to something different.
The people I admired and the people I respected were all just kind of moving on to doing different things.
All of us that were into that back then, you know, our tastes matured. Expanded, moved, and you move on, or you become stagnant.
Like a year later, somebody played me Kill 'Em All by Metallica, and I was like, oh my God, these things have more in common than I thought they did, or than I thought they would.
And then bands like from the hardcore scene like DRI, for example, or Corrosion of Conformity segued over, and they became crossover bands where it's like melding the hardcore with the metal aspects.
Punk really exploded in the mid to late 90s. It was actually kind of dizzying to those of us who'd been around in the 80s when bands like The Offspring and Rancid and stuff blew up, and there was this whole next level of commercial punk that we had never imagined because we thought punk was so uncommercial.
Hardcore has to be aggressive, and once you start polishing that, it just becomes another rock band.
Now granted, you listen to that music and it is pretty commercial. It's what we called mall punk because we were into this hardcore stuff that was more intense.
A few years ago I was watching Green Day get accepted into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm like, how did they make it before the Dead Kennedys? How come the Circle Jerks? How come the Bad Brains and all that? How come these guys aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
You know, I remember watching my TV and seeing Bill Clinton on the lawn of the White House with the Perner and the guys from Soul Asylum, all his arms around him. I thought, what the hell's going on in this world, man? This is like bizarro world. Aren't those guys from Loud Fast Rules?
At that time, you have no idea that you're a part of something that's going to have legs 25 years later or 30 years later that people are still going to want to hear about and talk about. I had no idea. I thought every town would be like Minneapolis.
It just is like anything else, though. I mean, Social Distortion play fucking 2 weeks at the House of Blues in Orange County, and every night sold out months in advance. I mean, it's a validation, and I think it goes a long way just to kind of prove that all of us that were passionate about it to begin with were on to something, that we were right in the first place.
By the time it got really popular, it just became another one of those things that someone's doing it in an REM video and it's just everywhere, and then it kind of loses its charm. And then you just got every jerk off in the audience jumping off the stage and landing on his head, and it's just nothing.
Hey, kids, rock and roll. Nobody tells you where to go.
When that fucking REM video came out where everybody body surfs and stuff, and so that happened for like that week or month that was out. It's like everybody wanted to do that.
You only have to meet one guy that's in the audience wearing a halo because he did a stage dive and nobody caught him, and now he's like, I got a broken neck.
You know, there was that time in your life where summer vacation seemed to last forever, and it was this magical time. Like, we were all friends, and we're cruising around on skateboards, and we're drinking big gulp pops from the 7-Eleven, and life is just good, man.
By 1984, hardcore had a second generation.
It became a youth scene pretty fast. I was surprised how fast that happened. It was impressive.
And so the bands, I think, started to realize, we need to play all ages shows because a lot of our fan base are kids that are under 19. They're kids in high school and junior high, and the skateboard kids and, the young punks want to see them play.
You're standing there and you're watching the big boys play at the upper deck. You were leaning in, you were part of it. You were like there, and they're encouraging you, especially the big boys. Start your own band, do your own thing, start your own fanzine, write your own comic book, And you were doing it, and you're like, yes, I will. I'll do it.
We would hang out in uptown Minneapolis. I don't know why, but we just started gravitating towards this this neighborhood of Lake Street and Hennepin and the surrounding couple blocks, and there was a McDonald's there, and you could sit outside of the McDonald's.
That was a big place for us to meet, man, because you don't have a phone. I was south, and my buddies were north from there, and that was where we met.
Just, McDonald's was just something I just was not into anyway. I mean, remember Corporate Death Burger, Ronald McDonald, MDC?
It's a shame it was McDonald's, but it was McDonald's, They had a patio. We all sat there until the cops started chasing us away from there. And then the cops were like, you can't be here anymore.
The second wave of Minnesota hardcore were called McPunks and considered a blight.
And there was also the straight edge thing was going on, So there was the kids that drank beer underneath the bridge, and there was the kids that were straight edge. But everybody was cool with each other. It was kind of like everybody was united. We didn't know what we were doing, but we knew that we were doing something. And we knew that adults didn't like it because police would show up for no reason, And they would write articles in the newspaper about punk rockers.
And those kids got in trouble all the time. People were going out of their way to fuck with those kids.
After a while, people would come in from neighboring suburbs, like they were going to the zoo, to come in and look at the punk rockers and see people with mohawks and stuff.
It's a clown show, It's like we get to dress whatever we want, but everybody else was the ones losing their minds, man. I wasn't. I was having a gas.
Are you someone to be afraid of?
No. No, why should anybody be afraid of me? I'm a normal person.
All McDonald's is, it's just a place for people to congregate and be together and be with friends.
So the problem, or perceived problem, of punk rockers will no doubt continue to persist while merchants and passers-by keep a nervous and watchful eye on them. And sooner or later, in the sea of trends, this new wave will probably be replaced by another.
We'd sit on the phone all night and talk about how we needed to start a revolution because Ronald Reagan's coming into office and, it's bad news. And so we're going to start this band, and that was Outcry.
Outcry were looking for positive teen rebellion.
We didn't drink, we didn't smoke dope or anything like that at the time. We were getting off on the straight edge thing and not preaching it, but just that's what we were doing. We're just getting high on the music, brother. The thing was, it was never about trying to have a career or make money. We just did it. I mean, it was just fun. It was just so fun to play. We'd play a show and you'd get $30 at the end of the night from the show. And we would just go make stickers and flyers and stuff like that, or T-shirts with the money. There weren't many adults around, man. The ones that were like 20. That we were doing this without coaches and without adults. And, we did it all on our own. And I remember, and I never thought about it at the time until I got a little bit older. I remember thinking, this is really amazing that we're actually pulling this off.
Hardcore continued to draw disaffected youth.
I got into punk rock because I'm full of ADD and dyslexia, and I was disappearing in school, and I was losing it. I didn't have a lot left in me, and I felt it was I don't fucking understand these people, and I don't know where I fit in. I need to make a loud noise. That's how I'm gonna be known, and that's how I'm gonna be heard, and that's how I'm not gonna disappear into nothingness, And so I wanted to be really loud. I think everybody was like, you're 2 years late. You're 2 years late. But my bands are fairly popular, man. Skullfuck got to play with. Our first show in a bar was the main room at First Avenue, opening for the Exploited. And that's the fucking band, right? That was the band I wanted to play with. I didn't want to play with, I didn't want to play with the Replacements.
my little brother, Tim, was playing in bands of that second wave and doing the shows and stuff. And yeah, it was one of those things where I just kind of like always just like shrugged, like, what, you know, seen it, done it.
We were like the next wave of people coming into punk rock, and they didn't want to support us. Nobody was there to fucking help us. Fuck this guy, Tom Hazelmeyer, because I played with his brother. He wouldn't even look at us, you know?
It's a really arrogant attitude, but it was just like, you know, I can't help it. I'm over it. I've done that. You know, it's just like if you spent 2 years painting everything in blue, and then you're over it, you move on, and you come back, and then your brother's going, look, blue. You're just like, so?
And I still love to be punk. And I still love to dress up. And I still love to make a racket, you know? And that's what turned me on, was it got loud.
And then there was another wave of like the little brothers of my friends that started coming up underneath that, like Blind Approach, Toxic Youth, and the Libido Boys from Mankato, who actually had some pretty decent success as a punk band.
But hardcore is still definitely alive, well, and thriving in Minnesota.
The fact that it's still going kind of puzzles me, because it seems to be like you're just kind of doing the same thing that bands were doing 30-something years ago, and you're not doing it any better. I guess you like it. Cool, you know, play your thrash hardcore.
As long as there are bored kids who are pissed off and the availability of cheap guitars and cheap drums, there will always be an intense fuck you kind of music coming from the fringes of punk rock.
And it is a subculture that self-regenerates consistently.
Who am I to say? You know, I'm an old guy now. I liked it for a while, but you know, 35 years ago or.
People don't want that to end. It's like a party. It's like, oh man, the party's done. It was the best party ever.
You know, hardcore kicked ass and still kicks ass. Just I'm not always in the mood to listen to that sort of music.
Who I was as a teenager and a punk is core to my being, and it informed me for the rest of my life for who I want to be and how I want to go about my life and how I want to think.
My youngest daughter, I go, hey, you want to hear some of the music I used to play? And I put it on and she started to cry, which I guess is probably the effect I was looking for.
You know, yeah, you wonder about youth culture. Is there such a thing anymore? I mean, my kids probably have it, but I don't ask them about it because I figure it's none of my business. You know, I'm their dad, so I shouldn't know about the shit.
The stuff that we railed against in the 80s, those are all unaddressed. I mean, you know, everything we protested against in the 80s has gotten worse. Disaffected young people who are out of touch with what's going on have every reason to get involved in hardcore punk today as they did in 1981. Here at Extreme Noise, we've been operating quietly under the radar, except for an occasional blurb in the city pages. 25 years, most people don't know we're here. Since about 2006, 2007, we have just been scraping by, due just to the enthusiasm of the people who work here. It muddles through day to day, but beyond the occasional 25th anniversary show, don't expect anything big or life-changing out of this group.
I'm not fooling myself for 1 second to think that the 80s and 90s were a pivotal time in culture. I think there's a pivotal time in culture constantly. All right, so we're not quite done yet.
Lots of people want to make a career playing music and make money playing music. You can't do that playing hardcore. It's impossible. It's been tried and it doesn't work. You will work a day job and play in a hardcore band on the side because it's what you like. and you will participate in the subculture and have a great time doing it because it's what you like, but you will never make more than gas money, and that's just the truth. If you're trying to aspire to something more, you will have to play more commercial kind of music. And if you're gonna do that, just don't bullshit me about it.